My name is Kamlesh Kapoor. I'm historian, teacher, and author. This is part 2 of the theme under the heading Freedom from Bias, the Last Frontier to Cross. We did part 1 in the last discussion, and today we are going to do the second part. This part traces the roots where in the history of ancient India, for recorded history, say about 7,000 millennia, where is the word caste in any sense or in any corresponding term is used. So this is what we are going to do in this session. So just to recapture, what did we do in the last section? Last session we did who introduced the label caste for the social structure in India and what was their motive and how did it work for them. And if you go back and you remember what we did last time, the caste word was used to make artificial categories by the British, and by their own admission, they explained why did they create it, how did they use it, and how did they demonize Hindu Dharma by associating with that, and just ridiculed culture or demean the social structure, almost everything. And also we discussed the meaning and uses of the term Gotra, Varna and Jati in ancient India. And that is exactly the words they were used at that time. Gotra, lineage, Varna, the occupational economic structure, and Jati as the parentage or who gave birth. In this context, some of the bogus categories, which has absolutely no context in the history or even the meaning, there's no meaning to these words. And I explained that these words are like Brahmanism, Brahmanical. What exactly are these adjectives or nouns? There is absolutely no sense of the word. This was coined by later Western authors in their own speculative mood or in their own perception of Indian society. So this discussion now, today, aims at removing perceptions about caste and gives the historical cultural roots of a subject which is so interwoven in all academic institutions, public places, private, educational, and yet very little is known about the superficial idea, what it is not, and nobody even cares to define what it is and what it is not. Simply, the word is used randomly and casually and as an adjective here and there. So today, the aim is to give better understanding with the facts related to the issue. It does not aim at telling the viewers or the participants what to think and how, but it simply gives the reality of the social systems, which actually emerge from a certain historical event or scenario. It has cultural roots, and it also emerges out of the ecological necessities. if the environment is such and ecology is such, the climate system is such, then people dress in a certain way and relate to each other in a certain way. If there is abundance of food crops, people have different ways of dealing with each other, and they have more leisure to ponder on different things, think about philosophic issues, so on and so forth. So this is how the whole thing is coming out of the historical narrative. So skipping the ancient history, which I explained before, let us start with the first recorded foreign visit. Megasthenes was ambassador, Greek ambassador, after Alexander died. And he came to Magad. Magad is the most central place. It was the most central place at that time. Today it is modern day Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, and Madhya Pradesh. So he came to the capital of that place, Magad, Patliputra, which is now called Patna. He mentioned 7 social classes. He said there was philosophers, Brahmins, Buddhist teachers, husbandmen, shepherds, artisans, soldiers, civic officers, and ministers. Now, out of these 7 categories, who in the list are to be considered Shudras? The ministers, the civil officers, the shepherds, who exactly? And who in the list is untouchable? The artisan, the skilled worker, the bricklayer, the builder, who exactly? So this, the whole book Indica, in which Megasthenes mentioned all these things, unfortunately is no longer available. But other Greek writers of that time put down, they were contemporary to Megasthenes, and they put down at least parts of the book which were available to them. So, Varan and sociocultural progress, how did the two are related? Varan was a craft. It is almost like a union, a guild, or you can say a clan, economic clan, and an administrative unit at the same time. It afforded an individual, right from childhood, an option. It doesn't mean that they had to do it. They gave the individual an option to acquire a certain job, skill, and acquire the training for that job. And if it is the job is that of his ancestors, he has ready-made environment, tools, and everything. But if it is something else, then an equally able teacher was found for that job. So it was not mandatory that children of the one Varan had to be the same occupation. Now let's see a couple of examples. For example, Vishwamitra was a king, and later he became a Brahmin and a teacher. And similarly, there are so many other examples where people were born as Brahmins, like Dronacharya, and he did the work of Kshatriya as well as Brahmin. So you see, this notion that everything was like rigid, molded in a certain way, and nobody could get out of that mold is total mythical notion. In fact, it's a mischievous notion being passed to the students and everybody. Now, during the ancient times, this economic structure helped a lot. The rulers changed, the kingdoms collapsed, some expanded, some vanished. But the craftsmen, the architects, the farmers, the traders, and all the occupations involving in manufacturing, arts, and literature continued uninterrupted. The Kushans came after Mauryas, and the rest of this society was least affected by their rule. In fact, they adapted to the culture and this socio-economic system. Now, can we compare European economic system and Middle Eastern society at that time? Someone should draw a picture of the two classes that they had. What was mentioned by people like Aristotle and later by Christians, and every kingdom right up to the 18th, 19th century, 20th century even, there were two classes. There was ruling oligarchy, which was brutal aristocracy, and slaves. That's it. So sometimes aristocracy was there and no oligarchy, sometimes both combined together, and then there were slaves. And slaves were not citizens. This is as per the admission and narrative given by Aristotle. Now, what were the accomplishments in the year from 500 BC and 1000 CE in Europe or anywhere else? Practically nothing. That really something to boast about. So we shift now to the dynamics of social structure in India. For the people who are born in a certain jati, for example, I am Kapoor, my birth jati was Chopra. Now I am part of the jati, that is my surname. I am included in that group of Chopras. I had a sense of belonging to the clan with all the privileges. It was not a way of exclusion from one class to another. And it was not even static. It expanded with the needs. Obviously, the economy changes, expands. There are more traders needed or more farmers, so on and so forth. And these people maintained order, and the social structure kept intact through all the upheavals that the polity or political rulers they went through. When each did his duty, there was a self-imposed discipline. And also there was some kind of pride that I am trained as that and I'm able to do it in a disciplined way. Something to be proud of. Creation, creativity, and at the same time, improving yourself in that skill. Some classes shrank, others expanded, I have already explained. Now, the next allegation, which is absolutely baseless, is that there was a Manu. He was the starter of the Indian civilization, and he wrote the scripture, and he created this law of 4 castes. The whole thing has neither any sense nor any historical context. Manu of Samriti. Samriti literally means scripture. Whereas the Vedic traditions for almost 5,000-6,000 years was oral tradition. So the question of Samriti did not arise. It came much, much later in the first 1,000 years before the Common Era. So, Manu of Samriti in the 2nd century mentioned that everybody is born ignorant, and at birth there is no knowledge, and therefore he used the word Shudras for them. But after they get education and skills and acquire some kind of, go through learning, they are considered Dvija, twice born. Later distortions and wrong translations, they absolutely do not tally with any kind of a narrative from the classical literature of that time. Foreign accounts of visitors up to 700 AD do not describe Indian society with Shudras as a class. You have already seen the slide before where we mentioned that 2nd century BC, they are not mentioned. Similarly, when Fayan came in 4th century AD, he did not mention Shudras as a class. The words untouchability or oppressed tribals did not exist in the literature of the 5 millennia of Hindu India. And that is a fact. Who were the tribals? There will be a separate session on the discussion about who were the tribes and why they came to be oppressed now and what happened to their fate all through the history. And of course, the start of untouchability. All of these things will be in the next session, session 3. So now, let us see the confusion about Manu. When they say Manu in the beginning of civilization in India, he started. Now he started, he wrote the Samriti and started the caste system. Now this is obviously people are history challenged or language challenged or both. So let's see. Historical evidence clearly indicates that Manu Samriti came several centuries after Mahabharat war and was probably done by someone named Manu. This Manu was not Adi Manu, the first Manu, nor was he listed among Manus of the next 6 Manvantras who came after Swambhav. Swambhav was Manu, Adi Manu. That is how, Indian calendar of Manvantras and Kalpa started. 432,000 years is one yuga, and that is the calculation multiplied by 1,000 and then multiplied by 6. It becomes Kalpa. Eventually, this whole thing was way before Mahabharata, Ramayana, even probably the writings of Vedas. So he could have written something like that is most unbelievable, beyond imagination. The notion that Hindu Dharma came into being, Manu wrote the Smriti, caste system along with subordinate position of women were laid out by him. For the followers of Vedic Dharma is twisted, misleading, and at the same time, I would say, mischievous. Now there are Dharma Shastras, which are actually philosophy books, deep philosophy. None of the major Darshan Shastras mention Varan or confused Varan or social structure. Major Samritis written such as Manu Samriti, Artha Shastra, they do not endorse exploitation or ill treatment of any Varan or Jati. Those teaching distorted versions of Manu Samriti, by extension Dharam Shastra, are the actual culprits who are causing confusion and maligning Indian society. And in order to further cross-reference, one can read chapter 3 of a very famous book by Swami Dayanand Saraswati of 19th century, Satyarat Prakash. This is for any understanding of Hindu Dharma or social structure, that is a must-read book. Later on in the 17th century, Guru Nanak Dev used the word Jat Path. He also did not use the word Varan. During that period of continuous invasions and influx, Varan system had already collapsed. The Brahmins were killed, the Kshatriyas were destroyed in the wars, and traders were there because they were needed, manufacturers were there, farmers were there. So, Jati surname continued playing a major role. Why? Because Hindus firmly believed, and it is scientifically true now also, proven true, that marriage between cousins should not happen. And if it does happen, it leads to birth defects in the children. In order to avoid that, Jati surname is absolutely must. So within the same Jati, if the marriage takes place, possibility is that the two parties, groom and the bride, they were third cousin or fourth cousin. So this is to avoid that. Also, Jati gives an identity, who gave me birth and like that. Now, untouchability and discrimination. Many people say that Buddhism did not have caste. They did. Jainism did not have caste. Actually, what I mean is not the caste. Buddhism and class. Jainism and classes. Sikhism and classes. Islam and classes. Christianity and classes. In order, there is a book of Portraits of a Nation, History of Ancient India. I wrote a few years back. Chapter 13 explains the layers of various classes in the social structure existing in India when all these different religions coexisted in India. Having said that, we will next time in lesson number 3 go now beyond how the caste system was imposed on India, untouchability started, why it was necessary, who started and who continued, and who tried to abolish it. All of these issues are going to be further discussed before independence of India and thereafter. So the series will be, I thought that it will be 4 parts. Now I feel it might take the 5th part, that what are the categories which are used in modern India in the last 70 years. Having said that, thank you very much and namaste.